Okay, I think I'm recording now. So I'm just going to go through a few questions from section 2 of Prep Test 52. Okay. So just going in self-paced mode. It'll give me a warning at 35 minutes. So if I do, for some reason, go up to the 35-minute mark, hopefully I won't, but if I do, then I am just going to go ahead and stop there because it's a pretty long video. Okay, questions. All right, starting with question 10. Okay, so this one is a necessary assumption question, and I can discern that really quickly because I see the word assumption in my question stem, and then I also see the word depends. Okay, so that's going to indicate a necessary assumption. Nice thing about necessary assumption questions is that we can use the negation test. Okay. So let's go ahead and start reading the stimulus here. All right, so in order to reduce traffic congestion and raise revenue for the city, the mayor plans to implement a charge of $10 per day for driving in the downtown area. Payment of this charge will be enforced using a highly sophisticated system that employs digital cameras and computerized automobile registration. This system will not be ready until the end of next year. Without this system, so the word without there is key. Okay, so that is going to indicate a requirement. So the system is actually required, okay? Without this system, however, mass evasion of the charge will result. Okay, so if they don't have the system, then people are going to be able to evade the charge en masse. Therefore, when the mayor's plan is first implemented, payment of the charge will not be effectively enforced. So that really depends on the mayor's timeline. So when it's first implemented, they're saying it won't be effectively enforced. So right away, I can tell that they are assuming that it's going to be implemented before the system is ready. Okay. So noticing that gap comes from carefully following their logic and reading with kind of precision and seeing, okay, like the system is necessary in order for them to be able to effectively enforce it. When is the system going to be ready? Well, not until the end of next year. Okay, so the mayor's plan must be implemented before that if we're not going to get effective enforcement because the system is necessary for effective enforcement. The system doesn't guarantee effective enforcement, but if we don't have the system, we can't enforce it effectively. All right, so what does it depend on? A, the mayor's planned charge for driving downtown will be implemented before the end of next year. That looks good to me. Okay, if it's not implemented before the end of next year, then the premises that we have already aren't going to lead us to our conclusion. Okay. So we can't say that the timing of this, like the timeline, is definitely going to mean that it won't be effectively enforced. We wouldn't have any reason to think that unless we have the implementation before we get the system ready. All right, B, the city will incur a budget deficit if it does not receive the revenue it expects to raise from the charge for driving downtown. I mean, a budget deficit isn't really, it's just not relevant to the conclusion that they're making about the issues in the argument right now. So it doesn't really deal at all with effective enforcement, and they don't come to any conclusion about whether or not we're going to get a budget deficit. It's, yeah, B is out. C, the plan to charge for driving downtown should be implemented. Okay, so right away that should, like that they're prescribing something, really isn't going to help me in this argument, right? What should or shouldn't happen isn't going to impact what will or will not happen in this argument. So C, I can eliminate. D, raising revenue is a more important consideration than reducing traffic congestion. I don't care which is more important. They have two goals. Comparing those two goals isn't going to help me get to the conclusion here. And if one is more important than the other, or they're both the same level of importance, either way, whether D is true or not won't have an impact on the conclusion. Okay. And then E, whether it's the most effective way or not, again, won't have an impact on the conclusion about whether or not it can be effectively enforced, right? So whether it's an effective way to reach the goal is a different idea from it being effectively enforced, this particular plan, right? Or this particular charge for driving downtown. If they can effectively enforce that, that's a different question or issue from whether or not having the charge is an effective way to reduce traffic congestion. So here there's like potentially just a mix up because the language matches, that effective part matches, but that's just a modifying word that can be applied to a variety of different ideas, and it doesn't really have anything to do with the issue in the conclusion. Okay, so I'm quite confident that A is the correct answer. I'm just going to go ahead and show answer here. So A is the correct answer, so we can move on. All right, next question on my list is 12. Okay, which one of the following, if true, most seriously weakens Perry's argument? Perry's argument is that worker-owned businesses require workers to spend time on, so just require, kind of an important word there. Okay, so that requires workers to spend time on management decision-making and investment strategy, tasks that are not directly productive. Also, such businesses have less extensive divisions of labor. Okay, now what would that lead to, right? Okay, so such businesses have less extensive divisions of labor than do investor-owned businesses. Such inefficiencies can lead to low profitability and thus increase the risk for lenders. Okay, so there are some inefficiencies that seem to be tied to worker-owned businesses and less so to investor-owned businesses that can lead to low profitability. So it can lead, it doesn't necessarily lead to low profitability. And so that increases the risk to lenders. Therefore, lenders seeking to reduce their risk should not make loans to worker-owned businesses. Okay, so they don't do like a very thorough comparison between worker-owned businesses and investor-owned businesses in terms of risk. So they just talk about a couple of potential negatives of worker-owned businesses, and that's it. So, here we might say, yeah, there's some increased risks because of these factors, but maybe there are increased risks in investor-owned businesses that lenders need to be looking at as well. Okay. A, businesses with the most extensive divisions of labor sometimes fail to make the fullest use of their most versatile employees' potential. Yeah, so that would be a con for investor-owned businesses, like that those ones would have more extensive divisions of labor. The issue with A is I don't think it's going to be the one that most seriously weakens the argument because it's very specific, like it's only attacking the most extensive divisions of labor, right? So it doesn't talk about all investor-owned businesses and something that's an issue with all investor-owned businesses. So I would, I would be cautious with that one. I'm not going to fully eliminate it yet, but I'd be cautious with it. I don't think it very seriously weakens the argument, but if the other ones don't weaken at all or strengthen or whatever, then A would be the best choice. B, lenders who specialize in high-risk loans are the largest source of loans for worker-owned businesses. We don't care about that. We want to know what lenders seeking to reduce their risk should do, not the ones who are really into the high risk. C, investor-owned businesses are more likely than worker-owned businesses to receive startup loans. Okay. That doesn't tell me whether the ones seeking to reduce their risk should go with the worker-owned businesses. D, worker-owned businesses have traditionally obtained loans from cooperative lending institutions established by coalitions of worker-owned businesses. So what has happened traditionally really doesn't have a bearing on what should happen now. Okay, so we can look at what has happened traditionally and try to understand why that has happened to maybe investigate what factors are at play in the decision-making process, and then that could lead us to a conclusion about what should happen now. But to just say that this is the way it's always been, just, not a good argument, not solid, right? So we're going to eliminate that. E, in most worker-owned businesses, workers compensate for inefficiencies. Okay, so it was the inefficiencies that could have led to the low profitability, which would increase risk. So if we're dealing with the inefficiencies before it becomes a problem, this is looking positive, right? So they compensate for inefficiencies by working longer hours than workers in investor-owned businesses. And that's great because the comparison really is between worker-owned and investor-owned. So E looks great, and that's the correct answer. Moving on to question 14. Which one of the following, if true, most helps to explain why the researchers drew the conclusion described above? All right, so this one would fall into the category of paradox or resolve, reconcile, explain. So here we are interested in what the conclusion is, right? Finding what that conclusion is, and then finding an answer choice that's going to help us to see that conclusion in a new light and see it as like, oh, that's completely reasonable. All right, so for one academic year, all the students at a high school were observed. The aim was to test the hypothesis that studying more increased a student's chances of earning a higher grade. So we're testing this hypothesis. It turned out that the students who spent the most time studying did not earn grades as high as did many students who studied less. Okay. Nonetheless, the researchers concluded that results of the observation supported the initial hypothesis. So supported the hypothesis that studying more increased the student's chances of earning a higher grade. Okay, so maybe the ones who spent the absolute most time studying didn't get the highest grades. Maybe the students who spent a little bit less time studying than those students got the highest grades. But overall, the way that it trended was that if you study more, you're more likely to get a higher grade. So it doesn't have to be like a perfect trend line in order for us to come to the conclusion that on average, on the whole, for like an individual student, if they study hardly at all, they're not going to get that great a grade. But if they study a lot, they're going to get a better grade. And then there may be like some other factors, but at the end of the day, the researchers are concluding that the results support the hypothesis, right? And the hypothesis is about the relationship between studying and earning a higher grade. So we have to stick to that connection and strengthen that connection rather than trying to think about other things that would explain the results, right? We're trying to explain the conclusion, not explain the results. So that makes sense. All right, A, the students who spent the most time studying earned higher grades than did some students who studied for less time than average. Okay, that would help. Yeah, that would help. Sorry, they earned higher grades than those who spent less time than average. Yeah, so the students at the very top got higher grades than some. I mean, it's not that strong. That's the issue that I have with A, right? So it's like, yeah, okay, that like helps a little bit, but not that much. Sort of like with, I think it was with 12, where, yeah, the first one, it was like, well, it weakens a little bit, but not that much. So I would keep it, but it's not that strong. B, the students tended to get lower grades as the academic year progressed. I don't really care about that, right? I care about how much they studied and the grades that they earned, not over like the timeline of the academic year. In each course, the more a student studied, the better his or her grade was in that course. So that's interesting, right? So they're getting it down to like within a specific course, and so maybe for certain courses, in order to get the highest grade, you like don't have to study as much, or it kind of yeah, you might not be able to compare overall the students who studied as much to the grades because it's going to differ depending on which courses you're in. So I do actually really like C. So I'm going to tentatively select C. Sorry, just checking. Okay, good. The students who spent the least time studying tended to be students with no more than average involvement in extracurricular activities. So, I mean, this one is going a bit out of scope. Like C helps to narrow things down in a positive way that stays within that connection between the amount of studying and the grade that you get, whereas D starts talking about involvement in extracurriculars and kind of might explain why some of like the quote unquote best students or the students with the highest grades didn't have enough time to study. If that makes sense. So yeah, that's a different one. E, students who spent more time studying understood the course material better than other students did. I mean, that's great, right? Unfortunately, that doesn't always lead to earning a higher grade, understanding the course material better. I mean, we would assume that that's how we would test whether or not they actually understand the material better. But we can't use that as a factor to like assume that that means the same thing as earning a higher grade. Okay. So E is out. C helps to explain. C is the correct answer. 15. Which one of the following is most strongly supported by the information above? Okay, so we're taking this information and supporting the answer choices, seeing, if it supports the answer choices. Okay. Researchers had 3 groups of professional cyclists cycle for 1 hour at different levels of intensity. Members of group A, B, and C cycled at rates that sustained for an hour pulses of about 60%, 70%, and 85% respectively of the recommended maximum pulse rate for recreational cyclists. Most members of group A reported being less depressed and angry afterward. Most members of B did not report these benefits. Most members of group C reported feeling worse in these respects than before the exercise. Interesting. Very interesting. Of about of the recommended maximum pulse rate. Okay. So let's see what's most strongly supported. A, the higher the pulse rate attained in sustained exercise, the less psychological benefit the exercise tends to produce. Yeah, we can't say that for sure because we're starting at 60%, right? Like what about 20%, 30%, 40%? You know, there really aren't enough data points here, I would say, to just say like the higher it goes, the less psychological benefit. We do have some evidence that, you know, tends towards that, but to make a trend line based on just 3 data points that are like clustered quite close together, I'd be pretty wary of doing that. B, the effect of a period of cycling has on the mood of professional cyclists tends to depend at least in part on how intense the cycling is. Yeah, because it's different levels of intensity, right? So this one is a lot more like the language is a lot less extreme, right? I love this phrase, you know, at least in part, depends at least in part, right? That there's like some relationship between these things. So I do, I do like this one. This one's looking good to me. Okay. For professional cyclists, the best exercise. So you see like my skepticism there with the word best. I don't know. Yeah. If we can say that for sure. The best exercise from the point of view of improving mood is cycling that pushes the pulse no higher than 60%. And what about 65%? I don't know. I mean, again, that's a little bit too extreme, I'd say. D, physical factors, including pulse rate, contribute as much to depression as do psychological factors. I mean, certainly that's way too broad, way too broad. Moderate cycling tends to benefit professional cyclists physically as much or more than intense cycling. So here they talk about physically, like the physical benefits. And I do think that here, because they're talking about like the mood benefits, that, you know, they talk about depression and anger, right? So physically, no, we go with that. So I would definitely go with B on this one. Most reasonably worded is usually a good rule of thumb for this question type. All right. This is a flaw question. Which one of the following arguments contains flawed reasoning most similar to that of the argument above? So we're trying to match the flaw. So first, let's find the flaw in the original argument and then see if we can get some matching stuff below. Also helps to identify what the conclusion is and sort of the form that the conclusion takes and try to match that to the conclusions in the answer choices. Anyone who believes in extraterrestrials believes in UFOs. Okay, so if you believe in extraterrestrials, then you must believe in UFOs. If you don't believe in UFOs, then you don't believe in extraterrestrials. But the existence of UFOs has been conclusively refuted. Okay, so UFOs do not exist. Okay. Therefore, a belief in extraterrestrials is false as well. No. So here they are conflating belief with reality. Okay. Conflating belief with reality. Okay. All right. A, anyone who believes in unicorns believes in centaurs, but it has been demonstrated that there are no centaurs, so there are no unicorns either. I really like this one. Okay. So belief versus reality, like that. B, anyone who believes in unicorns believes in centaurs, but you do not believe in centaurs, so you do not believe in unicorns either. This argument is perfect. Okay, that's an argument by contrapositive. That's totally fine. They're talking about belief the entire time. They never bring in whether or not that belief is actually accurate, right? So when you talk about, what someone believes and that you can conclude that if you believe X, you must believe Y, that's very different from saying that Y is false, therefore your belief in X is false, right? So saying someone's belief is false is a way of saying that their belief does not actually accord with reality. So reality is different from their belief. So what they're saying here is that since we know that UFOs don't exist, therefore we know that extraterrestrials don't exist, and therefore a belief in extraterrestrials is false. Yeah, so it's that thing of switching from state of mind to the actual state of affairs in reality. C, anyone who believes in unicorns believes in centaurs. You don't believe in unicorns, so you don't believe in centaurs either. So this one here is just a mistaken negation. Okay, so this is where they've messed up in creating the contrapositive, and they didn't flip, they just negated. So that is a mistake, not the same mistake as we had in the stimulus. Okay, here it talks about whether or not the belief is justified, which is different from saying that the belief is false. In order to say that someone's belief is false, you actually have to prove that it's not true, right? You have to provide evidence. To say that someone's belief is unjustified, all you have to do is shoot down their evidence or the connection between their evidence and their conclusion, right? That they don't have evidence to prove their conclusion. But you don't actually have to provide evidence necessarily. You just have to show that their argument is fallacious, right? Their argument is disconnected. E, anyone who believes in unicorns believes in centaurs, but it's been conclusively proven that there's no such thing as unicorn, so belief in centaurs is mistaken as well. So this one makes the same mistake as the original, but it also is a mistaken negation. So they're adding an extra flaw in there, so it's not the most similar flawed reasoning. Okay, so A's got to be the correct answer. There we go. 2 more questions on my list here, 23 and 24. So hopefully I can get those done in the next 7 minutes. 23. Okay, so the application of the principle is most vulnerable to criticism on which one of the following grounds. This is essentially a flaw question, right? Where the principle is the premise and the application is the conclusion or contains the conclusion. Principle, it is healthy for children to engage in an activity that promotes their intellectual development only if engaging in that activity does not detract from their social development. So if it does detract from their social development, then it's not healthy. Although Megan's frequent reading stimulates her intellectually, it reduces the amount of time she spends interacting with other people. Okay, so it reduces the amount of time she spends interacting with other people, but does that detract from her social development, right? So yeah, she can spend less time interacting with other people, but is your social development dependent only on, the absolute amount of time that you have to interact with other people? Not necessarily, right? So it's possible that her social development is still intact, even if she doesn't spend the absolute maximum time possible around other people. Therefore, it's not healthy for her to read as much as she does. So that's what they're concluding, right? They're concluding that she doesn't have as much time to interact with other people. Therefore, engaging in this activity does detract from her social development. Therefore, it's unhealthy for her to engage in this activity. Okay, so it's vulnerable to criticism because it equates a reduced amount of time interacting with other people to detracting from social development. Okay, A, it misinterprets the principle as a universal claim intended to hold in all cases without exception rather than as a mere generalization. I mean, nope. Sorry, not the one here. B, it overlooks the possibility that the benefits of a given activity may sometimes be important enough to outweigh the adverse health effects. So, I mean, it doesn't go that far, right? So, it just gets to the point of saying that it's not healthy, not to say, therefore, she shouldn't do it. Okay, so it doesn't actually go to the point where B could potentially be a flaw. C, it misinterprets the principle to be at least in part a claim about what is unhealthy rather than solely a claim about what is healthy. No, because it's a conditional relationship between like healthy and not detracting from social development. So that only if part makes something, if something is healthy, that guarantees that it won't detract from social development. Therefore, we could conclude that something's not healthy if it does detract from social development. Takes for granted that any decrease in the amount of time detracts. Yeah, so D's got to be the right answer. It's equating those two things. And then here, E is talking about like a necessary versus sufficient flaw, and they don't actually make that flaw here. So they are arguing by contrapositive, but the issue is that we don't actually know that the necessary condition can be negated. Okay, so we don't actually know that it detracts from social development. That's the issue here. It's not an issue of like a mistake in creating the contrapositive. So D is the correct answer. All right, last one, 24. Okay, so this one's similar to 15 in terms of question type. All right, so we're taking the information and we're trying to see what answer choice is most supported. In response to several bacterial infections traced to its apple juice, McElligott now flash pasteurizes its apple juice by quickly heating and immediately rechilling it. Intensive pasteurization, in which juice is heated for an hour, eliminates bacteria more effectively than any other method, but is likely to destroy the original flavor. So they talk about flash pasteurization. Okay. And then they talk about intensive pasteurization. Okay. So flash is quick and then immediately rechilled. And then intensive is like you heat it for an hour. Okay. So okay. And then this is talking about their apple juices originally, but then it starts talking about citrus juices. So this is, however, because McElligott's citrus juices have not been linked to any bacterial infections, they remain unpasteurized. Okay, interesting. All right. Okay, so what do these support? A, the citrus juices contain fewer infectious bacteria than citrus juices produced by other companies. I mean, no idea about that. Comparing to other companies, we can't say. B, the apple juice is less likely to contain infectious bacteria than the citrus juices. This is like literally comparing apples to oranges, which is such a nerd. It's not really that funny. I'm finding it really funny here. Okay, so the apple juice, yeah, we don't know. Like we don't know. It's possible that the citrus juices still contain less for some reason, right? We don't have that information. We can't compare. C, McElligott citrus juices retain more of the juice's original flavor than do any pasteurized citrus juices. I mean, we don't know. We know intensive pasteurization destroys the original flavor, but we don't know what happens with flash pasteurization. The most effective method for eliminating bacteria from juice, which is intensive pasteurization, is also the method most likely to destroy flavor. No, I can't say that. We do know that intensive pasteurization is likely to destroy the original flavor, but there may also be another method that will destroy the flavor. We don't know that that's the most likely method. Okay. And last one has got to be the correct answer because I've eliminated everything else. Apple juice that undergoes intensive pasteurization is less likely than McElligot's apple juice to contain bacteria. Correct, because intensive pasteurization eliminates bacteria more effectively than any other method, including flash pasteurization, which is what McElligot's does. So E must be the correct answer. All right, there we go. And yeah, I did take up all 35 minutes. So I'm going to stop there. If you have any other questions that you'd like me to do in this format, let me know. If you let me know also if this is a good format for you or not. Yeah. And if you want me to go in depth on any more of the answer choices from these ones, you can let me know that as well. And how do I stop recording? Actually, okay, sorry, there we go. All right, bye.